available for sale. I'm sure you'd be happy to sign them. Yes?
Sure.
Okay, so we have books available for sale. They're also in our gift shop. So I guess we'll just get started.
All right. Hello, everyone. I'm AJ Schenkman, and this is Wicked Ulster County. What I'd like to talk about today is Gyp the Blood and the Ulster County Sullivan connection. I haven't really done a lot of talking about Gyp the Blood. I usually talk about Big Bad Bill, the Gardiner desperado. I guess maybe we should start there. First of all book royalties are given to Historic Huguenot Street in New Paltz, where I used to be consulting historian. But once my son was born, I had to start kind of kicking things back a little bit. I don't want to miss any of those moments. Like when I said, you should eat your vegetables. And he said, you know what, Dad, I've thought about it. I'm not really a vegetable type of guy. So, all right. So, just lots of wonderful little kidisms. So this book is on sale at the gift shop and can be ordered online. Also from here as well. And let's see. Actually, before we even start, Wicked Ulster, I'm blown away. It's like I'm not equating myself to a rock star, unless you guys want to. But rock stars talk about, that just dates me saying rock stars. But I'm sorry, I just realized that. But as far as Wicked Ulster, the book was an accident. It was the idea really came from my students who love to hear the appropriate stories about things that went on in the Hudson Valley in Ulster County. And then I was doing an in-service at SUNY New Paltz, and I think it's a Samuel Dorsky museum, and I was talking to one, I think it was a director, and it's just like, wow, these stories are so great, you should write a book. And so it became Wicked Ulster County. And the way this all started is just the love of a good story, and we'll get more into that in a bit. The next book that's been, it's been put off and put off and put off due to COVID and lockdowns and close downs. And it was originally supposed to come out almost 2 years ago. And this, it was supposed to come out August 1st, and then it was moved to November. And that's out by Roman and Littlefield. Again, all royalties donated to People's Place. And that's on 17 St. James Street, Kingston, New York. There's supposed to be another slide in there. But anyway, it's a thrift store and a food pantry for the community, just to make sure everybody's tummy is full and people have clothing and the basic necessities that we all should have access to. The next book in November 1st as well will be Unexpected Bravery. I was supposed to come out later, but they decided to move it up. And it's about women and children of the Civil War. The couple from New York, not too many, and it's Johnny Clem there. And other publications you might like to read, Murder and Mayhem in Ulster County. That was in response to, you guys have Wicked Ulster, but there's some mayhem in there, but we need more murder, like a Will Ferrell. I really need some more cowbell. A History of the Wallkill Central Schools, 75th anniversary. I had a co-writer there for a little bit. And then for the last two other publications you might like to read, my first book, Washington's Headquarters in Newburgh, and then Washington's Headquarters in Newburgh again, and Home to a Revolution. In fact, I am on Twitter, and I saw my name associated with plagiarism. And that's the first time, no, my third time in my life, I just spontaneously started to sweat. Because my name next to plagiarism, then I looked, once I calmed down, I looked a little bit more, and it seemed as though somebody had decided to take Professor David Head's book cover on Newburgh and the Newburgh conspiracy, and then basically plagiarize my entire book, publish it, self-publish it. So if you buy that book, I promise you I will send you a certificate of authenticity. So let's see. And then other things I do, 7th and 8th grade history. This year I'm doing 7th grade history in our social studies. It's a John G. Borden Middle School in front of an American flag there for the Times Herald Record at the Dupuy Canal House. And I'm also a town of Gardiner historian. I've done other things. Right now I'm working with the National Park Service monitoring archaeological sites up at FDR, Valkill, Vanderbilt, and I really don't do much with Van Buren. And also have been in the past a consulting historian to historic Huguenot Street. And for about 12 years, I was a New York State certified interior firefighter and CFR. So moving right ahead, Wicked Ulster started with my love of a good story. And as long as I can remember, I've always liked to know the history of an area when I moved in there. I always wondered when I had a coin whose hands those passed through. I'm kind of my family's historian. But what I don't necessarily like the history of great people. I mean, I like Washington, I like, Hamilton, but I more want to know about those other people. I tell my students history, herstory, and our story, just to have everybody included in it. And with Wicked Ulster, it runs the gamut from alligators in the Hudson Valley to people who are working on the Schenkman Reservoir and all the little villages and towns that went up as more and more people came to work on the reservoir system. People like Big Bad Bill, people who in some cases their only testament to their life is a headstone in a cemetery. One of the interesting, and I've been telling stories the entire time that, I guess I've been a historian, working at many historic sites, the last working farm in New York City and Queens, the Little Neck Farm, a Dutch farmstead. And then when I bought a house up in Kerhonkson, it was just, I absolutely love the history of that house. And I'm walking in the back with the last owner of the house, the last Sherman. It was built by Shermans and lived in much. And we went upstairs and he said, I just would like one more look around the house. I said, sure, Fred, that's all right. And I noticed, I actually went to let him have his own time up there, and I went downstairs and I started to smell cigarette smoke. And I'm like, smoking in my house is a niche. And so I went upstairs and I was about to say something, and I noticed that he was smoking a cigarette and his hand was shaking. And I noticed that he was, crying a little bit. And I said, Fred, are you all right? And he said, I was born in this room. And he said, and my brothers and sisters were born in this room. And we were outside later on. And I said, I got to ask you, on that pole, are those teeth? He's like, yeah, this was my grandmother's teeth. He goes, I think of the lower dentures. I said, what's the story behind that? He said, if you ever sell this house, I want those. He said, long time ago, he said, we didn't have running, a toilet in this house. He goes, Dad put in a water closet and a cesspool. And my grandmother was flushing it, pulling the chain and looking down, and her teeth fell out. And they got flushed into the cesspool. So Fred and his father went into the cesspool and they're slogging around in it. And they found her teeth. And they, bleach them, they clean them up and all that. And they give them to Grandma. And Grandma says, I'm not putting those things in my teeth, in my mouth. And so Dad said, well, I can't afford to buy you a new pair, so they'll be sitting on this pole bleaching in the sun. And that's where they've been for probably close to 100 years. And I just, I tend to like gravitate, towards, stories like that. One of the stories that caught my attention early on, probably even before Boardwalk Empire, where they talk about him, is the world of Gyp the Blood, or Harry Horowitz. I mean, I'm by no means an old man, but I'm older than I look. And I remember when Times Square was a seedy place, a place that you really didn't want to go down to. There were a lot of peep shows, a lot of pickpockets, a lot of women of the night or day, depending. And in fact, I remember on Times Square actually pulling a U-turn when I just got my driver's license and being pulled over by a cop. But it was just a real kind of, it was known as the Tenderloin earlier. So there was a lot of crime down there. And Gyp the Blood, this is Times Square, Broadway and 42nd Street. And this is from the museum, the city of New York. Times Square was known as the Tenderloin District by 1876. And it was named by Alexander S. Clubber. We wonder how he got his name. Williams, an NYPD captain, in reference to all the bribes he was able to take, because tenderloin's a good steak. I've been having chuck steak ever since I've been on the force, and now I'm going to have a bit of tenderloin. So the police are getting a piece of the action from the gambling halls, the prostitution rings, everything that, you know, you pay me off and you pay me the protection, and, you know, we'll let you do business as usual. If you don't let me, if you don't pay us off, well, then, you know, it would be a shame if something happened to you or your business. And by the way, it's a great, great book, Gotham, A History of New York City to 1898. There's actually also another book unrelated to this. I think it's a history of waterways of New York, mainly New York City. That was also really good to find out. And you find out that what was Times Square was actually a swamp. Early life, Gyp the Blood is born Harry Horowitz. He's from an Orthodox Jewish family, lived on the Lower East Side around 1889. And he acquired the first half of his nickname because somebody in the police or the underworld decided that his dark complexion made him look like a gypsy. Blood actually meant something like dude. Mr. Horowitz was a natty dresser, according to Michael Pollock of the New York Times. I mean, he always cared about, even when he was arrested, he would say, hey, can I just go put something on that's nice? So he was very concerned about that. And he wasn't a very big guy either. He's the leader of what's known as the Lenox Avenue Gang. The gang ran protection for local shop owners, and protection was not an option. So he'd ask you for, if you, you'd offer protection. If you said no, there might be violence visited upon you, or there might be something like, or they might just shut your business down, or they could bomb your business, any number of things. These are nasty, nasty guys. This is much later, the wanted for murder. He's 5'8½", so he's a little shorter than me, or about the same height, 140 to 145 pounds. Oh man, I weigh 160. So I guess he wasn't even really a big guy that way. He was a neat dresser, and the wanted poster says at 25 years old, he already had an opium habit, and he was also a gunman. The size did not match his ferocity. He was known for his ferocity. That's him on the lower left here. This is from the Library of Congress, which has a lot of these pictures. He used to take $2 bets that he could break a man's back over his knee, which when you think about it, I mean, it's horrific. One person, he broke it in several places and won the bar bet. So he would just pick someone out and say, $2. You give me $2 and I'll break that guy's back. So again, these are very nasty individuals. Police Commissioner WALDO, the city did its best to get the matters under control with the use of the New York City Police Department. Police Commissioner WALDO even went so far as to create a special vice squad with Lieutenant Charles Becker at its head. He was charged with the mission to not only crack down on the illegal activities mentioned above, but to also seek out the individuals who profited from them by way of extortion, pickpocketing, or graft. What WALDO did not count on was that the man in charge of this operation quickly became part of the problem. So the situation is starting to get the attention of politicians, of the police commissioner. And Times Square is a really bad place. And also people were starting to complain about it. And so he appoints someone, Lieutenant Charles Becker, who was from Sullivan County, to try to break it up. And he quickly realizes there's money to be made. And the problem is bigger than he is. And for those of you who are familiar, I mean, goes on for a long time. I mean, that's what Serpico's about, right? Where he's trying to uncorrupt the New York City Police Department. So Rhinelander Waldo, I mean, that's a great name. He looks a little like Steve Buscemi to me. I don't know why. Wanted to clean up the Tenderloin district. One person he appointed was Lieutenant Charles Becker. There he is. He's born in 1870 in the village of Callicoon, if I'm saying that right, Center, Sullivan County, New York. He's over 6 feet tall and 215 pounds. He is a big man. And they said, and that's a line also from a Bob Dylan song. I should end my quotes. My students would always tell me, you didn't close your quotes, they're open. Could kill a man with a punch. So again, he's born in 1871 in his teens, went to New York City. He worked as a bouncer. They had him even back then. When he earned enough money, he became a police officer in 1893, and he became part of the Strong Arm Squad in 1911. So he's the muscle behind the police department. Becker was taking kickbacks to ensure protection from raids by his squad of enforcers. He also became partial owner of some illegitimate establishments in exchange for protection. And if you've watched The Sopranos or you watch Goodfellas or any of those mob movies, this is something that early mafia is doing. So you have La Cosa Nostra, which is the Italian mafia, and this is the Jewish mafia, which some people have called La Kosher Nostra. So Becker did not collect the funds himself, but instead used mobsters to collect the money for him. One of those unsavory characters who later testified against Becker was Jack Rosenweg, better known by his street name as Bald Jack Rose. Oh, I love these names. As he became partners with a low-level gambler named Herman Beansy Rosenthal, this is going to be the downfall of Becker. Things would soon change for him. Bald Jack Rose, and I guess he is bald. Nice hat, though. He worked with another politician collector. Herman Beansy Rosenthal was a small-time bookmaker and gambler. According to an article in Times News Weekly, he knew that giving a cut of his earnings to various individuals was the reality of everyday life if one wanted to survive in Times Square. He was fully aware that Becker was someone who accepted bribes in exchange for his protection. He would prohibit police attacks on the shady businesses. Once Rosenthal caught the attention of Commissioner Waldo, he forced Becker's hand. The same article reports that Becker searched the home of Rosenthal and claimed that it was an unlawful gambling business. Some member of Rosenthal's family were arrested. So Rosenthal is not playing ball. He does not want to pay the kickbacks. So what happens is Becker tries to force his hand. The officers did a lot of damage to Rosenthal's home as well as some of their equipment. Rosenthal retaliated by blowing the whistle on Becker and his corrupt ways. Rosenthal went to the newspapers and later the district attorney to describe in detail what life was like with the men in blue. He claimed that they were supposed to protect their citizens, but instead were some of the worst thugs. He also implicated Rose as the collector for Becker. District Attorney Charles Whitman, and later Governor of New York State, is going to make his name by beginning to bust up that the kickbacks and the bribery that's going on in the Tenderloin. Again, another nice hat. I like that time when men used to wear hats. The Hotel Metropole today is the Hotel Casablanca. I've been told that there's still the bullet holes are still there. But you can't have people ratting on Becker, ratting on what's going on down in the Tenderloin district. the person, I would look at the Lenox Avenue gang, I would look at them more as a street gang. The person who is the capo, if you want to use mafia terms, or the big boss, I should say, would be Big Back Jack Zelig. The Lenox Avenue gang was one of his crews. So Becker found out that the gambler was going to testify about the goings-on in Times Square. He had to prevent Rosenthal from doing any more damage. So a hit was put out on Rosenthal. Later testimony by Rose discussed how a meeting was called in Harlem, which was the headquarters of the Lenox Avenue gang, the crew for another mobster, Big Jack Zelig. It was here that Becker called for a hit to be made on Rosenthal. He turned to some of the gang members who were well known to him, as well as to various newspapers. Rose, along with Harry Vallon, Louis Bridgie Weber, and Sam Sheps. They sometimes did horrible acts, such as the one proposed by Becker, for the right price. However, they would botch this job. Lieutenant Becker wanted Rosenthal silenced. Member of Jip's gang, Whitey Lewis or Lefty Lewis Rosenberg, Frank Kerficci, and Horowitz were employed for the job. In the early hours of Tuesday morning, July 16th, 1912, in a 1909 Packard, the men, I don't know what I was thinking there, I just left that there. Rosenthal was eating while another man watched as a lookout from inside the hotel. A messenger was sent inside to tell Rosenthal that he was wanted outside. When Beansy, as they call his nickname, came out, the men filed out of the car and filed at Rosenthal. One of the assassins finished the job by firing point blank into Rosenthal's head. They all then jumped into the car and raced up 6th Avenue. I don't think you can do any racing up 6th Avenue with the traffic anymore, before vanishing into the darkness. Just before the final shot into Herman, supposedly one of the men said, "Hello, Herman. Goodbye, Herman," and killed him. Rose caves. He turned himself in and identified the gunman as well as the driver. The getaway car was tracked back to him. Shapiro, the driver, then confessed. He admitted that he drove the Packard that carried the killers to the Metropole. He identified the men in the car with him. Francesco Frank Carafici was arrested within weeks. I'm sorry about the printing, not the typos. In Harlem with his wife. In August 1912, it was assumed by tips that at least some of the gunmen had bolted north to the Catskills. More specifically, some of the wanted criminals fled to Ulster County, as well as to counties surrounding Ulster. Frank being arrested. In the case of Alon, he lured Beansy out of the hotel. He was actually caught in Big Indian, located in Ulster County. He later became an informant, turning in evidence to the state in exchange for immunity from prosecution. Vallon's testimony was instrumental in sending not only the gunman to the electric chair, but eventually he'll also send Becker as well. And there's pictures from the Library of Congress of them being arrested. Jacob Whitey Lewis Seidenschumer, I think is the way to say his name, who was one of the gunmen, was caught not too far from where Vallon was apprehended. He was captured in Fleischmann's, just over the border from Ulster and Greene County. New York City detectives journeyed to Kingston by car, and then from Kingston, according to the New York Times, took a train to get him. Louis and Jip were finally caught. Horowitz is left, and Lefty Lewis Rosenberg after their capture in 1912. Jip and Lefty had been holed up with their girlfriends in the third-floor apartment located above a dry cleaner on Ridgewood Avenue, which straddled the border between Brooklyn and Queens. As a detective burst through the door, the stunned duo were sitting at a table in their underwear while their dinner was being prepared. They surrendered without resistance. Before this, there's some believe that Jip the Blood is in all the newspapers. It was in Daily Freeman, the New York Times, was in what's today's the Poughkeepsie Journal, that many of Jip and Lefty were actually at some points in Kingston. At some points, they were up in the Catskills. At some points, they were in Saugerties, and everybody was saying that they had seen this guy. They had seen Jip and Lefty. And I think I have another slide. No, I don't have that slide there. And what's going on is that detectives are actually trailing these two individuals' girlfriends, and they trail them as far as Kingston. And every time they are told that Jip or Lefty is in an area, it seems as though they arrive a little bit too late. Some of the gangsters came up to this area, up to Sullivan and Ulster, into the Catskills. Why? Because there's a large Jewish population, what later becomes known as the Borscht Belt. You have a large Jewish population where they can be hidden. But eventually they're caught. They come back to New York City where they're caught. And Horowitz, Rosenberg, and Seidenscheiner and Fici were convicted in November 1912 and sentenced to death. On April 13th, 1914, Horowitz was put to death in the electric chair along with the others. Sam Sheps, longtime gangster, he paid Jip's crew for the killing. He was a gambler who owned casinos. He was a star witness against Jip's crew and Becker, as was another underworld figure named Louis William Bridgie Weber. Harry Vallon, based on his testimony, Jip the Blood and his followers are executed, as was Lieutenant Charles Becker. Vallon was in the car with Rose. His verdict was overturned in 1913 and reversed on appeal. The execution took place on July 30th, 1915. The process took 9 minutes. So, and they're now they've talking about Lieutenant Charles Becker being executed. They believe that he probably was involved in taking bribes, but they now believe he was not involved in the actual murder and that he probably should not have been executed. And there is Becker's headstone and Woodlawn Cemetery. On his coffin, his wife placed an engraved silver plate, Charles Becker, murdered July 30th, 1915 by Governor Whitman. So his wife was one of his most vocal, the vocal opposition to him being, Becker being killed. Again, I don't want to say Becker was completely innocent. I mean, he was on the take, but but they don't believe now that he was really involved in any of the killings. And that is it. Does anyone have any questions? So as far as getting involved with Jip the Blood in Ulster County, I get more involved in the book, as well as other mobsters that came up to this area. I also get involved in other more mundane things that are going on in Ulster County. It mainly goes from around the 1870s up to, I think I cap it around, the latest I think is 1920. And people have asked me, why did you not spend more time on newer stuff that went on? Well, because some of the people are still alive. And for instance, when I talk about the Humiston Funeral Home being burned to the ground, I remember talking about that. I think it was at the Kerhonkson Firehouse when I was a firefighter there. And an older firefighter raises his hand and says, what about so-and-so? And it turns out, if you've spoken to, Humiston's youngest daughter. And I didn't want to say her name. And and I said, his youngest daughter, if she's still alive, she's got to be about 101. He said, I think she turned 102 yesterday. And I was like, oh my God, I mean, I don't want to malign people's families. In fact, one of the reviews in my book was written by a Lawrence Weitzman, who I believe is from Kerhonkson. And, and he was like, you didn't include my house. And there was a big mob hit in my house. And, and as I believe I wrote to him and said to him, it happened relatively recently. And the guy who was let out of jail, he's still, everyone's pretty much still alive. But still, even with murder and mayhem, I still get family members that'll contact me every so often and want to know more information, or they'll say, yeah, you know, like I don't think I put it in the book because a family member asked me not to, but like there was a killing in Wallkill, and a family member asked me not to keep it, not to put it in there, but when the store, which used to be a part of the telephone company in the early days, a switchboard for the switchboard. Recently, when that place was remodeled, they actually found some of the shell casings that the police were looking for way back in the early 1900s. But, you know, sometimes, you know, people call me up and ask for more information. They'll tell me I have something wrong according to their family history. Big Bad Bill, when I was writing about that, that's a Deo house. And the president of the Deo Family Association at that time, because I contacted her to ask her a question, she said that was my grandfather. She said, I had no idea that this happened. I had no idea that he was brutally assaulted like that. And, you know, and I'm like, you know, might have been just kept in the family. And the house where Big Bad Bill, the whole thing took place, is on the corner of Ireland Corners in Gardiner. And it's the Ulster Savings Bank now. So, but I enjoyed researching this book and writing this book. And a lot of the information came from the newspapers, because the newspapers are more like tabloids back then. Getting names that are spelled correctly is one thing. Getting the dates correct is another thing. Pronunciation of names is another thing. But they really just, the news was very sensational, and the facts seemed to actually count less than the sensationalism of the story. And even the New York Times gets involved in it a little bit, especially with ghost stories. But some of the craziest stories that I found were associated with Brown Station up by the Schenkman Reservoir and that whole area. So, and also some of the people in the area that were very upset that all these new immigrants were coming in to work. And with the immigrants coming in to work, and these large cities, almost, they're towns that happen overnight, that kind of gives birth to, you know, the DEP police. So, yes.
Across any of the gangsters that were staying at Shanley's Hotel, they would come up, they were friends of Shanley's.
Where was Shanley's? In Napanock? No, I haven't at all. The only thing that I have about Napanock in that book, if I remember correctly, is an alligator that's found in the D&H Canal. So, and alligators seem to be found quite a bit.
Can you tell us that story?
God, I'm not sure I can remember it. So it's one of many stories. People used to keep pet alligators. They used to find these alligators. It was a brisk alligator meat trade, but people would, I remember my mom telling me when, and I should say my grandmother, when she was a little girl, people would buy these little alligators as pets, and then they'd get bigger. So they just would let them go. And someone had one and let it go down in Ellenville. And when some guys were working on the D&H Canal, they're like, was that an alligator? And they ended up catching it later on. But up in Slightsburg, outside of Kingston, there's another alligator story. A guy's looking to hunt a muskrat, and he trips on like a 12-foot alligator. So, and then there was one pet in the armory in Kingston. There was an alligator. There was another guy who owned an alligator in Kingston. And what really stuck in my head about that one, I believe that made it into the book, or maybe Murder. I think it's Murder and Mayhem, that there's a real problem with stray dogs and cats and people just not wanting their dogs. And he said, well, my alligators love fresh meat. I have them enclosed in a stockade fence, you know, just, you know, feed them the alligators. And then somebody in the Daily Freeman said, but the problem with that is, can't they bite me? Can't they hop up and bite me or take me in? And he's like, no, they can't hop, they can't jump, they can't skip. But if you're nervous, just lower them in with their leash. And, so every time I go by this house, which I think is on Fair Street, I try to picture alligators there. And for those of you, the most interesting story in that book that a lot of people gravitate towards, and especially it's in Murder and Mayhem again, is Big Bad Bill. And he's such a character, and he's just, I mean, it occupied the covers of so many newspapers for so long. What he did was horrific, but I don't want to give that away. But the cross-country chase that ensues, and when you think about these lawmen like Sheriff Boyce of Ulster County, they're not communicating with walkie-talkies or telephones or cell phones. I mean, they're just, visiting with other sheriffs. Did you see this one? Or they're using telegraphs. And Big Bad Bill, when he's finally caught in California, I just remember him saying to Sheriff Boyce, he says, "I'm so glad that you caught me, because if anybody else had caught me, I would have put up a fight. But it's an honor to be caught by you. But it's Christmas time and it's cold out in the east. And I really like the smell of the wildflowers in the spring. Why don't we just all kind of hang out here? We could stay here and just go back east in the spring." And in fact, one of the other things I remember is when Sheriff Boyce, and I think it was Under Sheriff Decker might have been, showed up to the jail in California. Big Bad Bill sees Boyce, and he jumps up and hugs him, and he says, "Thank God you came to get me. There were really bad people in this jail," not realizing that he's one of those guys. And it seems to be the root of the evil with him is that there's this drink. Shangum is, when Bill is around, is a dry town and dry county. This is in the time, let's see, the Bordens, I don't even think we're there yet. So it wasn't even named Wallkill. The hamlet of Wallkill was known as the Basin. And there was a drink called Liquid Lightning, Liquid Dynamite, New Jersey Lightning. And it seems to be the cider that was created that was flash frozen. And you just kept making, upping the alcohol content. And Bill just could not handle the alcohol. So when he drank the alcohol, it would make him crazy. He'd lose his mind. And he would go on these week-long assaults of people. He would, and then find, and people kind of, even the law people just well, this is Bill, this is Monroe. But finally he ends up killing someone in the end. And he's all in my Murder and Mayhem. He's in Sullivan County. He's linked in World War I with a German spy. And then he just disappears. He's in Attica. He's in Dannemora. Not Attica, I'm sorry. Sing Sing. He's in Sing Sing. And if you go on 84 in Fishkill, there are the two correction facilities. The one on the right, if you're going towards New York City, used to be known as Mattawan, and it was for the criminally insane. And he stayed there for a while, and I can't get his, I couldn't get his psych file, even though he's been dead for a really long time. But there's quite a bit of information on him, but it's, it's really, really hard to get into because some of it is, again, sealed forever, and I'm not a family member. So any other questions? Yeah.
Didn't Charles Becker have a brother, Robert, who was also a cop in New York?
That I don't know. But
I think he came, actually Robert retired, I think, from the NYPD, came back and was a constable in Callicoon.
Yeah, no, that I don't know.
They actually grew up on a farm in Schenkman.
Oh, okay. Okay. So, yeah, no, I don't know anything about his family. I just researched as much as I could, when it pertained to, Gyp the Blood. And also because he's the only police officer, as far as I know, that's ever been, put to death for, like that, and and it took him 9 minutes to kill him, which must have been excruciating. So, and then to find out that, probably shouldn't have been executed. But the Jewish mafia is also amazing to kind of research onto itself. But there's another guy, oh God, I'm trying to think of his name, Charlie the Jew, and that was, and he's another guy a little later that's running the New Jersey waterfront. And then, of course, the Italian mafia becomes paramount. Any other questions?
What's
All
one
right.
of the earliest stories you have?
From here, I think it's like 1870s. And I think the last is probably maybe 1920s. So I don't really go to anything past that, 'cause I didn't want to take a chance on people being alive. So, but the other books that I'm writing about, I mean, people, long since gone, like, American Revolution, Civil War and stuff like that. But even though I find that I think in this book, there's something about Cornelius Hasbrouck, who is actually, so that would answer your question. I think, is it Wicked Ulster, Murder and Mayhem? I did do a couple, I think, on the American Revolution. So that would probably be the earliest one. And, some family members, like the Hasbrouck family, the president then came up to me and he said, "Why do you always dig up dirt on my family? They're really good people." And I said, "There's no doubt." I said, "But that one, but Cornelius, with Cornelius Hasbrouck, whose father built Washington's headquarters in Newburgh, it's the longest military residence of Washington for the entire American Revolution. And it's where a lot of good things happened that really set some precedents for the United States. But after Cornelius and Jonathan had beautiful pastures, and they allowed the government to keep cattle there, but the government really wasn't good at paying the Hasbrouck family for the damage that the cattle were doing, as well as just paying them for, using the pasture. And Newburgh is a hub for military activity. And there's a continental ferry there, and all the roads going to Massachusetts and Connecticut run from there. And so Cornelius decides, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take matters into my own hand, and I'm just going to take some of that cattle and I'm going to sell it, and I'll consider us paid. And he didn't tell the government, and they don't look kindly on stuff like that. So he goes about selling it, and he gets caught, and he's sent to Kingston, and he stands trial, and he's actually branded. So it makes it into the Clinton papers, it makes it into the Continental Congress, and, because this is an ongoing problem. But there were thoughts that he was a Tory and he escaped to Nova Scotia. They just lost track of him. And because of the internet, and because you can look through newspapers like a million pages in seconds, it was very hard to find out what happened to this guy. And also historic Huguenot Street, some papers on the Hasbrouck family ended up in their archives. And also looking into Ken Hasbrouck Sr.'s documents that he had, I was able to put pieces together. And then one day I'm up in the Kingston archives, in the county clerk's archive, and I'm bored in the vault, and I'm just looking around, and I said, what? What's the chances that Cornelius Hasbrouck is in the deeds here, or anything, or any of his family members, because Newburgh used to be part of Ulster. And sure enough, there he is. And his attorney is John Sudham, who owned that corner house at Ford's Museum, a very well-known attorney, and began to put all the pieces together. And I traced Cornelius Hasbrouck down to the town of Sandwich in Upper Canada. When he died, I don't know, but he's alive as late as the first decade of the 1800s. But he's in Newburgh as late as the 1790s, because I found a document where he's selling property off the Kit patent to his brother, Isaac, in 1800. And it already says formerly of Newburgh. So he probably just didn't want to be found. But, I don't think he was a Tory. I think he was just a silly individual who did something silly. He's fencing stolen government property is what he's doing. And then he's caught again heading to, I think, New Jersey into a loyalist bastion. And he's caught again. And what saves him is his relationship with George Clinton. His father was good friends because his father was not a nobody and he was a noted patriot. So I know that some of the Habsburgs are like, nobody wants to know that, their family, did something like that in the American Revolution. So, yeah.
In Murder and Mayhem, you mentioned anything about Gross Hardenberg and how he was just possessing people who would get foremen to rent, and they would clear the land, and then he would come in and dispossess and keep them off his land, and then he ended up murdering.
No, I don't think so. I don't think there's any Hardenbergs in the book. I think the only Hardenbergs that, oh God, I don't know. I mean, I'm not trying to be like funny, like, I've written a number of books, so sometimes it's hard to figure out which ones are in it, but I write a lot about the murder and mayhem that goes on in the French and Indian War, right on the Sullivan and Ulster border. I mean, because you think about it, I mean, this was all the frontier. And
Gerardus Hardenberg, and he's very gross, and he had poor manners, and anyway.
yeah, there's a lot of them out there.
And so I'm happy he kicked him off the land, and so he ended up shot.
I mean, I just was reading that Alice Roosevelt, Teddy Roosevelt's daughter, didn't like to eat dinner with President Harding, because, of the way he ate and the grunting sounds that he made, and that he was very uncouth. So there's a lot of, those type of people in history. My favorite quote with that one is completely unrelated, is Teddy Roosevelt said, "I can either be the president and run the country, or I can control Alice. I can't do both." I'm reading a biography about it right now. This whole time period, I'm kind of moving out of it, and I'm just totally taken with FDR and Eleanor and Fala and Teddy and and all that stuff. And I've been doing a lot of reading and a lot of researching about them and their background. But all the dirt on them has already been exposed, right? So, any other questions? All right. Thank you for coming. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you want to buy any of the books, I'm happy to sign them. I've been told by a book expert that just have me sign it, don't have me inscribe it, because then it loses its value. So,
Thank you.
all right, thank you. Take that off.